All right, guys, I apologize for that. Hopefully, this is going to work this time. Yeah, I have no idea what happened there. Rumble totally died. The stream died on X, everywhere else. Not sure what's happening, but you know what? I'm the kind of person that, regardless of what happens, I'm not a quitter. I'll stick it out to the very end. If it quits again, I'll start it. I'll start again. That's just how I roll. So we're just getting started. I'm just checking my feed here. It looks like we're still good, and we're going to continue on where we were. So basically, the old feed is done. I deleted it, so now we're starting brand new. So just for posterity, my name is Kyle Suggs. This is the Conservative Take. We had a hiccup on our live stream about 10 minutes in, and we're talking about the Wisconsin election. And I was showing you a screen from the Scott Presler feed. And Scott Presler, if you know who he is an influencer. He is really what he was an influencer at first, and he made a video that went viral dealing with how unfair it was for illegal immigration and how it affected Black population and the crime that was affected by that, and by lack of resources that were not being appropriated to Black people as it was going to illegal immigrants. And that video went incredibly viral. And from there, he launched it into a political action committee. And then he became really active in the 2024 election. He was honored by President Trump in one of the rallies. And I believe he was even given an award, I believe, by Trump. But he ended up carrying Pennsylvania for us through his political action committee. They went door to door. They did a bunch of things with canvassing people who were low propensity voters, urban voters, people who were gun owners, registered people in gun shops, and literally turned Pennsylvania. It's close to red as we've seen in probably our lifetimes. And the way it's going now, the registration numbers in Pennsylvania will probably be more Republicans by the end of this year, whereas before we were down by about 400,000 votes going back about 10 years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in this particular live stream here. In this live stream, I'm going to bring in this particular X feed that he had, because I think it's important for us to know why this election coming up on April 1st between this, let me see, I have his name here. It's two candidates for Supreme Court in Wisconsin. One is a Republican, one is a Democrat, and there is a 4-3 majority in Wisconsin for Democrats. And one Democrat is actually retiring, which gives us an opening to actually come in and regain the majority. Because right now, in this particular special election, which is what this is, a special election, if the Democrats were to take the Supreme Court, then they have the ability to literally redraw districts and, in essence, give them, the Democrats, 2 additional House seats. So here it is. Here I have on the screen here. This is Scott Presler on this website here, on this X feed. It says here, let me be perfectly clear. If Wisconsin doesn't elect conservative Brad Schimmel on April 1st, the liberal court will redraw the congressional maps. If Republicans lose, and Republicans will lose 2 House seats going into 2026, if you care, get everyone you know out to vote. You have 6 days. And he said here also, Scott Presler speaks the truth. The fact is, MAGA simply does not have high propensity numbers or people. It needs to become one in order to keep MAGA going. Engage, vote. He goes on to say here, he says, I'm going to be honest with you. Even if you don't want to hear it, Republicans have been losing special elections all over the country, even red districts in Iowa and Pennsylvania. Democrats are fired up. Unless we begin focusing on ground game, we will lose 25 and 26. Now, this is pretty doom and gloom here, I know, but for me, based on what we're seeing, early voting numbers, I'm not overly concerned, but I am concerned. And here's why this is happening. Now, this is totally backwards. If you have been following Republican politics for the past 20 years, like I have, we knew that Republicans always showed up in the odd number years and in the off number election years where you don't have a president at the top of the ticket. That's just what Republicans do. We show up to vote on election day. We're dependable. We're high propensity voters, meaning we vote 3 or 4 out of the last 8 elections. We vote. Low propensity voters do like 1 or 2 or 0 of the last elections run. So what's happened is essentially, and why this is now, and quite frankly, it's actually a kind of a good problem to have. But what's happening is that the realignment that's happened in this country in terms of where we have, traditionally speaking, a left and a right, a liberal and a conservative, a Democrat and a Republican, which we still have, but those names are no longer carrying the same value as they had, let's say, going back to Coolidge, coming up through Nixon, through Ford, and coming all the way up through Reagan. It's different. It's way different because those, and even Bush and so forth, those particular Republicans were dealing with a ideological stance in terms of their positions, meaning that it was issues based. It was something dealing with, like, let's say, looking at the budget. Do we spend on defense or do we spend on social services? If it comes to, let's say, economics in general, from a philosophy standpoint, are we dealing with supply side economics, so-called trickle down economics, which I think is a bad term, but let's say supply side, or do we deal with a more liberal approach with Keynesian economics? Those are ideological, horizontal type issues that are left and right and conservative and liberal and all of those sorts of things. Well, when Trump came along, Trump came in and positioned himself as a populist, meaning he is going to take issues that are not only popular, but pragmatic, and most importantly, effective, and we're finding out more now, common sense based. And so what do I mean by that? So Trump comes in 2015, comes down the escalator. He goes through a long line of candidates. Hello, Laura. How you doing? How you guys doing, everybody? The greater good. Thank you for showing up. I'll put you guys on the screen here. Thank you, Laura Jenkins from Virginia. I'm not far from Virginia. In fact, I grew up right across. I was born in Washington, D.C., and I ended up, working in, well, I never worked at the Defense Department. That's actually in Virginia. But basically, when you're in D.C., you're basically right there in Virginia. So Alexandria, Arlington, all that. So very familiar with the area. Not sure where you are in Virginia, but welcome here. The greater good. Got the fire emojis going. It's awesome. Thank you guys for coming on. So let me get to my point here. Let me get to my thing here, because this is really important to understand. Because, and by the way, if you're just joining, we're talking essentially about the election that's coming up on April 1st. That is going to be a Tuesday. And this is the article here that I'm kind of going to be covering. But if you don't understand the history and why this is important, I'm going to do it right here quickly. So again, I mentioned that when Reagan had his alignment, his coalition, it was dealing with the commies, right? It was dealing with getting us out of the horrible Carter economy, getting us back into an economic world power, is coming to, having a strong national defense. Pretty much what the Republican Party came up with when Nixon won the Sun Belt, going on through by a landslide, and when the South was basically being realigned to issues that Americans cared about and was less about race issues. And so, but now that we have Reagan and we had Obama come in after him a few years later, What Obama did was he started to turn the issues into more social issues, more socialist, commie, Marxist type of ideological issues, where we see things that just don't make any sense, issues that you can't defend in the public sphere, issues that are so dumb that you have to basically shut people down, make them feel stupid, denigrate them, cancel them, keep them from voting, whatever you can do, stack the media in terms of who's going to take your issues and take your side, or get appellate court judges or district court judges to actually do your best bidding, because there's no way you're going to be able to tell me that it's okay for a man to shower in the same locker room with a little girl just because he identifies as a girl on a soccer team. You can't tell anybody with a rational mind that something like that is okay. You just can't do it. So how do you get around it? You use it as a cover to get. You use other things like media. You use propped up propaganda. You use all kinds of things. If you say something about that, they call you a name. They call you I don't know, some kind of phobe. And next thing you know, they try to keep you from talking and speaking your mind. So essentially, when Trump came in, he said, enough's enough. Common sense is common sense. I think it's okay for men to play in men's sports. And I think it's okay for women to play in women's sports. There's nothing wrong with that. And so because of that common sense issue, the left got infuriated by it, because not only did they not like the fact that he took the opposite position, but they hated Trump. So no matter what Trump did, no matter how common sense it was, they went to the left of him, and the radical leftist Marxist wing of their party did the same. And now you look at a party now, 8 years removed from him being in office, is way worse now. They have literally only about 20 to maybe 40% of the issues, depending on what you're talking about. In many cases, they only have 20% of issues. If you talk about taking in a person who hops a fence, comes over, gets kicked back to his country again for coming over the fence, over the border, comes back a second or third or fourth time, commits a heinous crime, and then we find this person, and now we want to send him back, or kick to a prison somewhere, let's say El Salvador. Okay, that's like a 90% issue. There's only the extreme wacko leftist Marxist weirdos think it's a good idea to keep this guy who came over 3 or 4 times in our country illegally and then committed illegal crimes, and particularly ones that are violent and heinous, that they can't be deported into a prison somewhere else other than America. Nobody believes that. And so that's where the Democrats sit right now. And so that's why they need stuff like this. They need special elections to get them there. So getting around to this whole thing about the issues and how it looks in terms of the realignment. So before it was a left and right kind of thing. Now it's a vertical kind of alignment where things are apolitical, things that make common sense. Like, okay, let's say deporting bad guys across to outside of our country, or let's say that it's okay to have plastic straws, or let's say it's not good for a man to be in a woman's sport, things like that. Right? Those are issues that are universal. And that's why the Democrats are having a hard time, because Trump has taken all those common sense issues and formed a coalition, which is huge. We have urban men. We have white men. We have, and particularly young men, young people for that matter. We have black men in particular. We have working class, blue collar people who, traditionally speaking, voted for Democrats in droves. The only demographic that the Republicans or the MAGA movement does not have really, if any kind of chance right now, is probably black females, but even that's trending slowly towards us. Common sense issues. And so that is essentially why it's hard to get people to the polls, because whereas before we had traditional Republicans who were on that horizontal ideological measure, aren't that way anymore. We have people who are working class who don't vote that much, low propensity voters who just don't go to the polls. They don't go. But the important thing for us now is we have a bigger tent, but we have to get those low propensity voters to the polls. I remember back in the day, it was easy to win during a mid-year election or midterm election over Democrats because they didn't show up to vote. They didn't. They didn't have the boots on the ground to do that in a mid-year election. So right now, our infrastructure with the Republican Party is not such that getting that low propensity voters out when there's not a president like Trump at the top of the ticket. So that's where we are. I took a long time to explain that, but getting back to this, I want to get back to this because I want to show this one more time up on the screen here, where it says here, it says, so if you know any Trump supporters in Wisconsin, I'm asking you to stop what you're doing and text them about voting for Brad Schimmel on April 1st. I've been posting about this election for 106 days, and I dropped everything to drive 8 hours to Wisconsin. You can all text. So yeah, so I want to spend some time on this because it's super duper important. And if for some reason we don't win this election, it's going to be a PR nightmare for us. The Democrats are going to be all over it, and it's going to be a little bit concerning, but not the end of the world. So let's get into some of these numbers here in terms of actual. Let's say I got it right here on the screen here. I think I got it right here. Early voting. Yeah, let's take a look at some early voting here because this is sort of important. So this is from Latinx adjacent Dr. PhD on X. It says here, Wisconsin update today. This is from 2 days ago. Wisconsin update. I'm not showing it on the screen. Let me share my screen. Here we go. So yeah, so this is from Latinx adjacent Dr. PhD. It says the update showed today, which is a couple days ago, a stronger performance for Schimmel than again expected. The gap between Kelly 2023 and Schimmel on a county basis has risen from 12.12% improvement for Schimmel. Nothing too noteworthy other than 26 IPEV votes overnight. In-person early voting, that's what that stands for. In-person early voting. So what this means is, and I'll break this down. So Kelly won in 2023 by a huge margin, huge. And so what they're saying is that she won, I guess 4 years ago. And it was such a huge margin to have a relative comfort level that we're going to do okay on election day. We want to shrink that early voting margin from, I think I have it here in front of me, some notes here. Okay, here we go. So, okay, yeah. So right now with the turnout advantage in the deep red counties in Wisconsin is up 101% in early voting. The Democrat counties are down, and the early voting trend is up 8.2 versus 2023. That's what we have here on the screen here. But we need about 11 to win. So we're about 3 percentage points away from actually closing the gap where we feel like this is going to be a safe hold. Now, if MAGA voters show up, it's a wash. It's not a problem. It's a done deal. The problem isn't the votes. We have the votes. The problem is chasing ballots and showing up to the polls, which is why if I didn't do a video on this on my platform, I'd be remiss and I'd be responsible in part for us not doing well. So I want to at least spend some time on that because I respect Scott and what he's doing. And I feel like I needed to take some time on this. So we only need about 60% of the MAGA turnout to win this. And this court will influence redistricting, voter ID, abortion, and 2024 recounts. So, yeah, so it comes down to basically laziness and us being able to have the will to come out and actually, get this thing done. So I'm going to go through this article a little bit more, see if I see anything here that can bring some more light to this. This is the Trump. You you see that? You can't see that, can you? Yeah, you can see it. All right, so yeah, there's a delay on my screen here. So if I don't see it on here, I get kind of nervous that something's going on. So we're good. So this is from the Trump War Room. So make sure to vote early for Brad Schimmel. It says here that Wisconsin is a very important election for state Supreme Court on April 1st, and early voting is underway. Brad Schimmel is running against radical left liberal Susan Crawford, who has repeatedly given child molesters, rapists, women beaters, domestic abusers light sentences. She is the handpicked voice of the leftists who are out to destroy your state, that's Wisconsin, and our country. And if she wins, the movement to restore our nation will bypass Wisconsin, and all voters who believe in common sense should get out to vote early for Brad Schimmel. So I'm going to be more into this. I was actually on a private call with Scott Presler and the Wisconsin team a few days ago, and some people from North Carolina as well. And I was going to actually go out there. It just didn't work out my schedule. But I will try and get in contact with the representatives who were out there on the floor, on the ground there, knocking on doors, and see what we're doing. And I may do a live stream on April. Well, I guess we will. That's a Tuesday. So we will do a show on April 1st. We may dedicate it directly to this and pull in a stream, maybe Charlie Kirk, and stream him and follow his War Room. They do a really good job. Let me see here. What else do we have here? Yeah, I've covered all this. They could get 2 more seats. There's nothing more to say here, really, guys. It is what it is. Nothing much more to say. All right, he has him here. Let's see what he has here. This is from Matt Smith on X. He says, well, let me just play it.
Well, I'm excited. You know, he won the popular vote in Wisconsin and in America, and him adding his voice to this will help me to get my message out to voters of Wisconsin about restoring objectivity to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And that is the plain, clear message. I know there's a lot of questions about this or that. In the end, that is the bottom line. Courts go back to administering the law, not politics.
What did you offer to him in return?
Absolutely nothing. He called me, and he knows about the race, and he knows that it's important that we have the rule of law in Wisconsin.
Do you think this is going to push you over the top to win?
I do, because there's a lot of voters who come out, they get excited about November 5th, but they don't recognize why April 1st is an important election. So, yes, we do need to get to those voters with a voice that's probably as big a voice as there is out there, right?
I saw an article where Elon Musk is putting in a lot of money on this race. He's all in on this, which is good. I think if Trump were to do a rally, let's say in Wisconsin somewhere, let's say Green Bay or Washington County, somewhere in there, I think that would be enough to get him over the top. I'm not sure if he's willing to do that or will do that, but that would be something that I would like to see him do, especially early on the election cycle. We're not quite there yet in midterms, but this is a huge special election that we have to get through. So, all right, so let's keep going here, guys. So the next thing I want to talk to you about, guys, is this article here from the American Thinker. It's called "Why Liberal Judges Have a Lot to Answer For," and this is from Tom Swift. And this here, I'm just gonna give the highlights here, and I'll kind of go through the article itself, and we can kind of get through some of the more fine points here. But some of the things that I mentioned before in my monologue there. If you have a bad idea and you're trying to pass it, you really can't do it through the front door. You got to sneak it in. You got to bash them over the head and give it to them. You can't just give it to the person and have them accept it in a rational way or a ethical way. You're going to have to lie or do something. And these liberal judges, leftist judges, who take the opinion that the Constitution and the founding documents and the framers were relativists, where there is no real black and white. You know, it's all sort of gray, and depending on the climate of the society, how we are as a people, what our sensibilities may be like in terms of this issue versus that issue, that it can be ever flowing and changing in terms of the Constitution and what the founders really meant in terms of their intentions. That's a bold-faced lie. All you have to do is go through the contemporary writings of that era. We talk about the Constitution, we talk about the Federalist Papers, but there's other things too, like sermons, notes, letters, commentaries, newspaper clippings, that this country was founded as a Christian nation. Make no bones about it. In fact, many states, you had to be a Christian to even be serving in legislature. And you had to at least identify the fact that there was a God and that he was a person who is involved and has moral authority over us. That was just in the writings. And so judges are basing rulings, I think, purposefully to get around the fact that this Christian nation is preventing them from doing the things they want to do, expand government, expand power, expand reach, and to put forth an agenda that was not intended by the founding fathers. That we have to have a moral society. The Constitution is not a document for an immoral people. It's a document that has to be followed with a moral premise, because otherwise it won't work. You say you can't legislate morality. Well, I would say this: if the legislation is already moral, then yes, you can. You just enforce the law. So that's, to me, that's a dumb statement that is absolutely untrue. If you steal from somebody, we know that stealing is a crime, and stealing is immoral. So yes, you can legislate morality, because if you steal, that's a moral crime, and yes, you're legislating it, and you're going to serve time, or you're going to pay a price for doing that. So that's not an issue to me. So getting to my point here, legal pragmatism, where these judges now are saying that whatever works, is whatever works, whatever does the job, because liberals and the left and the Marxists, going back to a mantra from the 60s, we talk about this all the time. It goes something like this: it's the revolution is, no, I'm sorry, the oh gosh, I forgot. Okay, the issue is not the issue. The issue is always the revolution. So whatever issue that Democrats or leftists say they care about, they don't really care about that issue. And we're going to talk about that when we get into our next segment, dealing with this whole thing. Well, actually, the fourth segment, dealing with the SignalGate, they're calling it. We'll get into that in a second. Whereas they don't really care that there was any sort of leak in terms of confidential information. They really don't care if there was a breach in protocol. They don't care if there was soldiers or people in harm's way. They don't care about that, because obviously they didn't care about the Afghanistan pullout and how that went. So that's evidence there. But what they really wanted to nail Pete Hegseth to the wall, because they couldn't prevent him from getting in, and they want to prevent the use of Signal as a viable messaging app in the government, because there's no way the deep state can mess with it, because it's ultimately secure, encrypted. In the end, it's wonderful. We've been using it here for literally years. And so that's what it is. So the issue is not the issue. All that matters for them is the revolution. So whatever works, they're good. So legal pragmatism, whatever works, we don't care. But see, conservatives, we're different. We don't go off that. We go off things like textualism, originalism. Basically, what do they really mean? Original intent. What do they mean when they said the right to bear arms? Did they mean an AK-47? Well, of course not, because they weren't invented yet. But did it mean to carry a military-grade weapon? I would argue yes, because that's what they use. They use muskets that were carried by the militia and by the Continental Army. Those same muskets that they used, the Continental Army, to fight the British were the same muskets that many of them used in their homes to defend their homes and their households. So that's original intent. And the framers' values, which I mentioned before about Christianity. And not just Christianity, it was a God-fearing public. Now, they weren't all Christians, but most of them were. Most of them were, and all of them, even the ones that they consider amoral, like, let's say, Thomas Paine or Thomas Jefferson, more or less, maybe, or Benjamin Franklin, those guys, they call those three guys out. But all of them believed in God and felt that it was important to adhere to his laws and his principles, and that he has a place in our lives. Now, the vast majority were devout Christians, evangelical, to a large extent. So, and that's one thing I'm going to give a plug myself to right now, very quickly here. I mentioned this on Tuesday. It's a class that I'm going to be giving in the next month or two, probably in early June, I think. It's called Biblical Citizenship in Modern America. It's through the Patriot Academy, Rick Green, and Wall Builders, David Barton. It's a cool course. It's about 8 weeks, and we cover the entire Constitution as amended. You get free course book. It's 100% free. It's online. We watch videos with Rick Green and David Barton. I facilitate this whole thing, and it's about an hour and a half each week. And in doing so, you learn all this stuff about the original intent of the framers, stories that came up around how things happen, how we've been lied to about were the framers, were the founding fathers, were they racist, or why Woodrow Wilson actually was the racist, and how he actually perpetuated racism and stereotypes and used his influence to remove Black history from academia, stuff like that. Stuff like how the Mayflower, the people coming over on Plymouth Rock and coming in through Jamestown, how even though Jamestown was probably a little worse in some ways because 20, 30 years later, slavery thrived down there. However, within the first 10 years, people at Jamestown frowned strongly on, let's say, man stealing. And if you were caught man stealing, you were put in jail and sometimes executed. This whole 1619 project they want to talk to you about, well, they don't understand that early on, especially in Jamestown, that was totally rejected. It was only until other things came in and slavery started to happen. But in, like, let's say, Plymouth in Massachusetts, totally repudiated. Incredible. So these kind of things, these false narratives and original documents that are held in the Wall Builders Library, which is an original library. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but David Barton has that. It's the largest privately held collection of founding documents of America in the country. And he goes to this documents, he pulls them out, dusts them off, and reads them for us. And we see exactly what the framers thought about all this stuff. And we realize that we've been lied to. And I love that kind of stuff. So that's why I think that's going to be important for you to go through that. And again, it's 100% free, and look out for more announcements on that. So these judges also are dealing with sabotage in terms of they're masquerading as justice, but they're not. And the court matters because the 2025 state races are absolutely critical for us to maintain this republic. So let's go here and kind of skim through this article. I'll go through the first few paragraphs here. And it says here, what distinguishes the rule of law from the rule of men is that the former contains limiting principles which sharply and fundamentally limit the ability of men to decide the law as they see fit. Limiting principles are what we remove arbitrariness and caprice from the law, or basically things that it's arbitrary. So basically, it's saying essentially, we have the rule of law from the rule of men is that the former contains limiting principles. So it's either, like I have here in my notes here, it's rule of men, not law. And that's what liberal jurisprudence means. it's no limiting principles, meaning that whatever we say goes. It's what I say, not what the law says. That's basically what this is saying in a roundabout way. It says the recent spate of nationwide injunctions and temporary restraining orders by district court judges against President Trump are strikingly devoid of either structural or doctrinal limiting principles, such as separation of powers or a conception of it having any real bite. If you're knowing what that means, separation of power essentially means that you have three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. They all have their own separate powers and duties and so forth. Now, there are checks in each of those that they can check other branches of the government, but they are separation of powers. The executive, the president of the United States, has a plenary authority, ultimate authority, to execute the laws of this country. He or she, as president of this country, as commander-in-chief of this country, has the plenary duty, I would say, to execute the laws of this country as written, and the Supreme Court and the other judges can come in and they can say, okay, well, this may not be exactly right, but they can't come in and stop the role of the executive branch, the separation of powers. And the legislative branch, the lower house, the House of Representatives, and the upper chamber, the Senate, make the laws. And that's how it goes. And so we mentioned on Tuesday how the House and the Senate, the Congress, or the Congress, how they can actually check the judicial branch by limiting their money that they get for their courts, removing courts, which many of these courts weren't even authorized by the Constitution, or by impeaching some of these judges. And I mentioned before on Tuesday how unlikely a lot of that is, but there are steps that can happen now that can put pressure on them and put pressure on people to know what's happening so that we can start putting pressure on our representatives to actually help to stem this overreach that we're seeing in Congress right now, or at least in DC right now. So this goes into a bunch of, it goes into some pretty heavy legal jargon and stuff like that, which is why I actually did my talking points beforehand. And so, but this is a good article that I'll leave a link to below. It goes to American Thinker, and it was from actually today. Check that out. It's called "Why Liberal Judges Have a Lot to Answer For." It's a very well thought out article. And all right, so let me get a drink here. I'm gonna check the comments here, see if we have any. All right, looks like we're pretty good there. I think now it's probably a good time to actually do a spot here for a partner that we're working with, and that's 1775 Coffee. Weak coffee is for the weak, and at Rumble, weak has never been part of the mission. No fillers, no fraud, no settling for mediocrity, just like 1775 Coffee. It's single origin, small farm, hand-picked, specialty grade coffee that stands for quality, free speech, and calling out nonsense when it matters. Forget stale, mass-produced beans roasted just enough to hide the flaws. Dark roast hits like a Trump tariff. Medium roast keeps it bold without the bitterness. And Vitality Mushroom Blend, well, that's the real energy and lasting focus with no synthetic garbage. For K-Cups, whole bean, or fresh ground coffee, go to 1775coffee.com. Use code STUDIO for 15% off. That's 1775coffee.com. Use code STUDIO for 15% off. And every dollar spent will enter you into a drawing for a Cybertruck and $30,000 cash. Again, that's 1775coffee.com. Use code STUDIO for 15% off. All right, so let's go to this next segment here. We're going to talk about the California race, which I kind of held off from last Tuesday because I couldn't find my information. And this may not be exactly what I want to present the first time, but it's enough to give you an indication of how bad it is for the Democrats. I mean, it's really, really looking like, they just don't have a chance going forward here. So I'm going to jump over here. This article is from the Daily Mail, which is not a huge conservative outlet. It has here the signs that America's woke heartland is about to turn MAGA. And the White House poster Craig Keshean reveals a statewide seismic shift. Let's go through this kind of slowly here because there's some numbers here I want to kind of cover. So Ronald Reagan, who was our president, I think it was the 45th. Help me out there. Maybe it was 45th. He was also the governor of California. And by the way, if you haven't seen the movie Reagan, which came out this past year with Dennis Quaid, you got to check that movie out. It will give you a whole new appreciation for the man. I grew up, he was my president for the early part of my life. And he was, and being in DC, I remember when he was shot. I remember that and how that made us feel as a country, or at least how it made me feel as a young kid at the time. But he was very popular. I mean, even amongst us kids, even then, kids were kind of cynical. We didn't like Jimmy Carter. We thought he was a wimp. We liked Gerald Ford because he was big and strong, and we felt that he could beat up Jimmy Carter. That's how kids think. But when Reagan came around, we just felt that he had power, he was funny, and he was someone that was strong. And so, but he was also the president, obviously. But he was the governor of California. So here, when Ronald Reagan was president, the state was ruby red Republican. That's right, it really was. That's right, it was, because he won California. With a GOP governor, senator, and hefty number of federal and local legislators. Apart from lefty San Francisco, it leaned conservative through the 1980s. Wow, I guess I've forgotten that. Of course, it's quite different picture today. California is firmly under one-party rule, and they're running the state into the ground. Now, I'm going to deviate here a little bit. I'm going to do an audible. Steve Deace, my wife told me, Steve Deace is a pundit. He has a show on the Blaze Network. Super duper cool guy. Great podcast. But he had the guy from Nerdrotic on there recently. And if you're familiar with the culture wars with a section of YouTube that's called the Fandom Menace, it's the group of people who recognize how Star Wars in particular, how Doctor Who in particular, how Ghostbusters in particular, how Indiana Jones in particular, how I missed one, Star Trek, Star Wars, how they all, and there's many, many more, have been destroyed franchise-wise by Kathleen Kennedy and the woke mob in California. Not just Kathleen Kennedy, just the whole culture out there in California, ruining these particular IPs or intellectual properties into the garbage dump. So that is something that that California is played in. And my point is that Nerdrotic, the guy, I forget, I don't know his name. He's anyway, but this gentleman, he was in California, in San Francisco for a while, and he moved his shop out of San Francisco into, I think he's in, where did he go to? Did he go to Texas, I think? Or Nevada? Maybe it was Arizona. But he got the heck out of California. And it was a big deal because people thought that he was a leftist because he's tattooed up, he's got a beard, and he doesn't talk politics at all. But because he has an opinion about certain things on YouTube in his movies, by the way, he has like 1.8 million subscribers there, he was getting attacked as a white man, racist, and all that. He was catching that. And many people were catching that because they were saying, okay, I don't like the fact that you took this one character who for the past 85 years was white, and now you're making this person black and not adding anything to it other than that. And you're basically taking not only the complexion of the person, but you're adding things into the plot that have nothing to do with the story, doesn't advance the story, doesn't give any background or any character or any weight to any of the characters. It's just a checkbox so that you can say, hey, we got this checkbox character in here. Aren't you happy? No, we're not, because you're making that person look even dumber because they have nothing to do. They're a token. They are an absolute token, and it makes for bad movies, and people see right through it, and they call them out. And they call them out because, like I said before, if you give people stupid stuff, you have to pass it off as irrelevant, stupid, or call them a name, or cancel them, or whatever you have to do, because we know in the playing field of ideas, you're going to win that argument, and the left can't argue, so they have to do something else to get you off the message or get you off the platform. And so that's sort of what I was getting at. Is that he left California, and he said that in this video, if I can find the video, I'll put it in here as well. It's from a couple years ago. He got like the last U-Haul in San Francisco because people were getting the heck out of California, and this was like 2 years ago. So that's Nerdrotic. It's an excellent website or a YouTube channel. Fantastic videos, just funny as heck. And anyway, but that's what I was thinking about there about California. However, new polling, if it is to be believed, it may not stay that way forever. A Madison McQueen survey released on Thursday shows 48% of likely California voters, 48% of likely California voters say they're likely to vote for a Republican governor in 2026. That's quite remarkable. Nearly unbelievable statistic considering GOP voter registration in the state is just 25%. Now, we mentioned here on this channel that voter registration is the number one key indicator for an election victory or loss. And at 25% Republican voters in California, that's fairly low, which means you're probably going to lose every single election when it comes to that. However, Trump ended up carrying, I got the numbers here. Trump flipped 10 counties in 2024. Kamala lost 1.8 million votes in 2024. This gentleman here who's doing this article said, as a lifetime Californian, I'm sorry, he's not saying this. He's saying about Reagan. Reagan being a lifetime Californian. His former White House pollster and a political operative who helped President H.W. Bush win the state in 1988, the last Republican victory there. I see the powerful undercurrents that may drive a GOP comeback. I do too. I see it in New York as well. I see it in New Jersey as well. I see it, well, definitely New Hampshire. I see it even in Minnesota. I see it in New Mexico. And I see it in, that might be it. Yeah, those are the big ones. Up to the late 1970s, California was neither pure blue nor red. The state had a liberal governor in Jerry Brown, and Democrats controlled the mayor's offices in LA and San Francisco, but certain counties like Orange in Southern California and the eastern parts of the state were conservative. The San Francisco Bay Area was blue. The rest of the state was politically mixed. So here's the poll here. Would you vote for a Republican candidate in California's next governor's election in 2026? And there you have it. There's Reagan in 1980, Santa Barbara. Let's see what else here. I mean, there's other things here. I mean, basically, surging property taxes and crime are chasing people out of their homes, thanks to inept politicians sending taxpayer money like drunken sailors while neglecting public safety. Look at the fires that just happened, the negligence that was happening there in the Palisades there. The folks who paid the steepest price were middle-class folks and seniors, like my parents, who had little more to their names than their nest egg homes. It goes on and on and on. You remember Gray Davis? Remember him? Yeah, I remember him. So, yeah, Gray Davis was elected in 2000 with disastrous results. He blew through a $10 billion surplus. So, yeah, Gray Davis, if you're not old enough to remember, that was 25 years ago. But yeah, that's him right there. this guy was a clown. I mean, he was so bad that's why Arnold Schwarzenegger came in and became the governor. I believe they recalled him. Yeah, they did. Yeah, so here it is. Yeah, so yeah, $10 billion surplus, and jacked up car taxes to stratospheric heights. Once again, California voters revolted by popular mandate, recalled him, kicked him out, and replaced him with Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people. The GOP resurgence was short-lived, and Schwarzenegger was followed by another Jerry Brown term and incumbent Gavin Newsom, and we know the rest of the story. So yeah, so they're just running the state into the ground. That's where we are. I have more numbers here at some point. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So this is good here. So this is 2020. You see the counties here. This is what so-called Biden won, and he flipped Trump. That is 10 counties. So with a GOP governor, senator, and hefty number of federal, local legislators, California leaned conservative through the 80s. It's all gone now. California is firmly under one-party rule, but if new polling is to believe, that may not last forever. So Hispanic Californians, typically socially conservative, led the charge with 43% voting for Trump in 2024. Trump got 43% of Hispanic Californians. And by contrast, Biden had captured 63% Hispanics in the state in 2020. So Kamala literally lost 20 points. And that 20-point difference is consistent across the board. If you look at white men who are unchurched in not urban areas, anywhere in the country, under 35. So white men, unchurched, under 35, working class in 2024 went up 20 points from where Biden was in 2020. Look at black men who are in urban areas, under 35, and working class. Same thing, 20 points in men. And so that's just three demographics: Hispanics, black men, 35 and under, working class, and white men, 35 and under, working class. So those numbers were consistent across the board. And when you do that, add those numbers up across the board, you will actually have an absolute landslide, which is what we saw in the last election. There's Arnold and W. What else can we talk about here? Yep. Yeah, I talked about the fires. So, yeah, let's talk about it real quick. Yep. So, a wildfire catastrophe driven by government incompetence and lethargy and arrogance, rather than ensure the state adequately cleared away flame-fueling debris or filled it with firefighting reservoirs or working fire hydrants. California Democrats sank $16 billion with a B into unfinished high-speed train project that was scheduled to be completed in 2020 and is now projected to cost $106 billion. The original estimate for the project was $33 billion. Where did all that money go? This is consistent across the board. If you look at just something as simple as Greensboro, North Carolina. I went to school at North Carolina A&T in Greensboro. And there is a famous building, the Woolworth Building, on February 1 Boulevard on Elm Street in downtown. It's the location where 4 black men from North Carolina A&T University, a HBCU, historically black college and university, went to and sat at the lunch counter at that Woolworth and started the sit-in movement at lunch counters across the entire country by college students. And there's a big statue for them downtown. There's all this stuff going on, all this hoopla and whatnot. Well, they decided to make that Woolworth into a national museum, into a civil rights museum. And of course, the shucking and jiving, the politicians, the Jesse Jackson, who went to A&T as well, several other people that I won't name here in this particular stream, but Skip Austin, he's one of them. Earl somebody. I can't remember his last name. Earl somebody. Anyway, but basically squandered the money and to build this museum. And it took a lot of intervention, public funding to get the money back because they claimed that there was a flood in the basement, whatever, and they lost like millions of dollars in this project. So I basically had to start from scratch. It took almost 20 years to get it built. It's just something that we see all the time when Democrats are running stuff. Now it's up and running now. It's very nice. I got a chance to go there in the premiere. I actually met Jesse Jackson. Got a chance to talk to him for a few hours at the premiere. So it's nice, but it was overpaid for. And it's an embarrassment to just the city and the memory of what that building stood for. Anyway, but that's just what it is. That's what Democrats do. They waste money and they use it for who knows what. All right, so I'm going to go here now. I'm going to talk about a little bit about this thing that happened this past week that everyone's talking about, and it's this, this deal with this Signal app mistake that happened where a journalist was allowed to get into this particular live stream. And I'm going to follow through this particular article here on Breitbart, which is essentially this Democrat senator, Tammy Duckworth, calls for Pete Hegseth to resign. He's a liar, she called him, an effing liar. And so, and that kind of gets to the crux of this whole thing. This headline pretty much covers the whole thing. I kind of led into it and kind of let you know a little bit about what my position on this is that it has nothing to do about what happened in terms of the breach of protocol, allowing this leftist journalist to get into the live stream and then to post the messages that happened on the live stream, making them public. And they're claiming, of course, that these messages were classified and they were threatening to our national intelligence, and they were putting lives at risk, and they were divulging war plans. And of course, none of that is true. So this article kind of goes through all that. And I didn't want to cover this because I didn't want to give it any more press than needed, but I would be remiss not to talk about it. This will probably be the last time I actually talk about it in any kind of detail. But let's just go through this here. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois issued a statement calling for the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who is pretty much awesome, to resign after the Atlantic pushed this liberal rag paper called The Atlantic, published an article showing private signal messages between Trump administration cabinet members in which Hegseth shared what the magazine labeled, quote, attack plans. And of course, you have these civilians who have no idea what's going on. They see these numbers and they think they know everything. And they post stuff that's untrue, which they eventually had to come back and say later that, oh yeah, we were wrong. They were not war plans, but the damage had been done. And of course, the media frenzy was all over the place because they were finally having something after being so far in the dumps, in the news cycles, being down on the everything that's happening with what Trump's doing and being totally lost. So they want to grab onto anything to get control of the weak, which they effectively did. And I will say that this is probably only the second mishap I think that the administration has done, this being the biggest or the bigger one. The first one would have been the one with the Epstein release. That was improperly done, but that was more optics and other things there too. But this was actually a bigger deal. But still, at the end of the day, it ended up being a nothing burger because nothing was actually released that was of any substance. Let's keep going here. I'll skip over her comments here, but well, she said this. She said, quote, if Republicans won't join us in holding the Trump administration accountable, then they are complicit in this dangerous and likely criminal breach of our national security, unquote. Yeah, right. Fine. No. And Kash Patel, the FBI director, said, yeah, I'm going to hold off on any kind of investigation until we know more. And basically, he stonewalled her in a good way. Not her, but there was a hearing this week. And he basically put a stop to all that. The Justice Department's on top of it. It'll get handled. And again, a nothing burger. But again, they're blowing it up because they have nothing else to talk about. Duckworth, and let me just talk about this. Let me just comment on this directly. Hold the Trump administration accountable. Who held the Biden administration accountable when we lost the lives of those American lives when we pulled out of Afghanistan in that horrible way? We pulled out of Afghanistan in a horrible, cowardly, disgusting way, looking like Vietnam. Those helicopters, leaving. I'm not sure where it was, at Hanoi or Saigon, wherever it was. That famous shot. It was basically a repeat of that humiliation. Not to mention leaving billions of dollars of brand new equipment for them, which ended up to our enemies around the world. So her statement comes after Jeffrey Goldberg, that's the journalist who got in he's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. He was the guy who got into the Signal chat. So if you don't know what Signal is a messaging app similar to WhatsApp, similar to Facebook Messenger, similar to, if you remember, Yahoo Messenger, anything like that. It's a group chat. But the thing about Signal is it started out as an open source tool, which means that it was basically free to use and to develop and to that sort of thing. But it's private in that it is a secure connection from A to B. So if you're in a conversation with, let's say I'm in a conversation with my wife, she's somewhere else, that connection between she and I is encrypted at a level that cannot be cracked. I think it's like 256 hash. It's the same encryption that they use for the blockchain for Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency. Basically unbreakable. And it is unbreakable. I'll put it that way. But more importantly is that it can only be on my phone or on her phone and nowhere else. So if you go to another device, it won't be there. It's just A to B, peer-to-peer, direct connection. So it can't be intercepted. And so that's why it's secure. So let's keep going. So he inadvertently had been added to a Signal chat entitled Houthi PC Small Group. Houthi PC Small Group by National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. Other members in the group included Vice President J.D. Vance, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, among others. In the article, Goldberg shares how several cabinet members had a back and forth discussion days before the U.S. carried out strikes on the Houthis in Yemen's capital of Sana'a. Per Goldberg's article on Saturday, March 15th, Hegseth sent a message which, quote, contained operational details of forthcoming strikes in Yemen, including information about targets, weapons the U.S. would be deploying, and attack sequencing. We'll skip down to this. So here are the articles here, or the messages. And Walls had a response here basically saying there were no locations, no sources, no methods, no war plans. Foreign partners had already been notified that strikes were imminent. The bottom line, President Trump is protecting America and our interests. And the actual press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said this: The Atlantic has conceded these were not war plans. The entire story was another hoax written by a Trump hater who is well known for his sensationalist spin. And Pete Hegseth comes in and says, so let me get this straight. The Atlantic released the so-called war plans, and those plans include no names, no targets, no locations, no units, no routes, no sources, no methods, and no classified information. Those are some really bad war plans, he said. This only proves, and whatever that says here, I can go on the X and show that, but I won't do it. So that's basically it. There's nothing more there. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, this was simply more than the just a mistake. I mean, Signal, it's a good application, but it's not all that intuitive. And I'm not trying to make excuses for him at all. It was a mistake. He owned up to it. The Walls guy. So, I mean, but it's, again, the Democrats don't care about any of that stuff. They don't care any about that plans or methods or operations or anything dealing with hurting or putting our troops at harm. All they want was an avenue to get Pete Hegseth fired, which is why you saw that the article started out by saying that he's a effing liar, and to remove Signal as a preferred platform for private discussion in the U.S. government. I think Snowden, who was the hacker who for NSA, he said that's a good tool. Elon Musk says it's a good tool, and if those people are saying that, then by all means, I'm going to go on their recommendation and use it. I certainly won't use Facebook Messenger. I certainly won't use WhatsApp, because Facebook has been known and it's been found that they have been spying on messages within Facebook and reporting people for things that they think were harmful to society. So yeah, so if you want private discussions, make sure you use something like Signal. I wouldn't even use Telegram. Telegram is good too, but Signal, I personally feel, is better. So what I'm going to do now, I typically do at the end of these things, I kind of go through my feed and see what's out there while we're actually on this live stream. And so I'm going to jump over here to X, and Elon posted this just now. That looks pretty interesting. Let's take a look at it.
And they steal people's social security is what happens. Is they call in, they say they claim to be a retiree, then they convince the social security person on the phone to change where the money's flowing. It actually goes to some fraudster. This is happening all day, every day, and then somebody doesn't receive their social security. It's because of all the fraud loopholes in the social security system.
How do you reassure people that what you all are doing?
Sorry, I didn't share it. I'm sorry. Here we go.
They steal people's social security is what happens. Is they call in, they say they claim to be a retiree, then they convince the social security person on the phone to change where the money's flowing. It actually goes to some fraudster. This is happening all day, every day, and then somebody doesn't receive their social security. It's because of all the fraud loopholes in the social security system.
How do you reassure people?
So that's Elon Musk talking about social security and how these people are running a game. Here's your 10 wall. I'm gonna go to my profile and see what I put there, because there's some things there I want to talk about. I just did that, reposted that. Actually, this is different. Let's see what this is. This may be different.
For you, what's the most astonishing thing you've found out in this process?
The sheer amount of waste and fraud in the government. It is astonishing. It's mind-blowing. We routinely encounter wastes of $1 billion or more, casually.
He said they're casually finding waste of $1 billion or more constantly. I'm going to rewind that.
We routinely encounter waste.
Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry.
This process.
We routinely encounter wastes of $1 billion or more, casually. For example, like the simple survey that was literally 10-question survey that you could do with SurveyMonkey, cost you about $10,000. Was the government was being charged almost $1 billion for that.
For just the survey?
$1 billion for a simple online survey. Do you like the national park? And then there appeared to be no feedback loop for what would be done with that survey. So the survey would just go into nothing. It was like insane.
For you, what's the most astonishing?
So SurveyMonkey is like free. And I think if you get a license for it, I think he said $10,000 maybe for a business, for a scaled license for something like that, for something that many users. 10 grand seems reasonable. And he said there's no feedback loop, meaning that the survey goes out but doesn't go back. So there's no information coming back to actually utilize that information. I mean, just the level of it's just hard to cope with this stuff, man. It's just hard to deal with this. I mean, there's no excuse for that. I mean, it's an insult to all of us spending our money like this. And J.D. Rucker here says it's all about money laundering, and it's probably just all it is. It's just people need to be held accountable. Let's put it that way, at least. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. All right, let's come down some more here. What else? Not much. Like I said, there's not much going on today in terms of news. Now, this is interesting. I'll actually play this. This is Joe Rogan. This is with polio, and I'll probably leave it here. This was he had Dr. Humphreys on it, and this is wow. This is kind of big. A lot of stuff I already knew. It's kind of long. It's 7 minutes long. Should I play the whole thing? I don't know. I don't know if I want to play the whole thing or not, but it's pretty impressive that the stuff out there. Yourself go to our Facebook or our X page and look at it. It's 7 minutes long. It talks about polio, essentially that polio was redefined in terms of what it was. In terms, it was the polio that was prior to the vaccine being made available was different in terms of after the vaccine was made available, in terms of what they could classify polio as, two totally different diseases. And the drop off was mainly because of definition, and that the health and the types of chemicals that were being used, arsenic and bad science in general, was causing the same types of injuries that polio would have caused in terms of parabolic polio, causing you to lose your function of your legs and so forth. It's just a whole thing. And it just shows you that greed is everything. And if they can find a way to lie to you, to get you to part with your money and your freedom, they will absolutely do it, because staying in power and getting rich and staying rich is the name of the game in DC for sure. So this is actually pretty good here. This is Marco Rubio, who I think is doing a fantastic job as Secretary of State. I thought this quote was pretty good. It's about 2 minutes long. Check this out.
Allies, we need to notify members of Congress. Other members of the team have different people they need to notify as well. And that was the purpose of why it was set up. Obviously, someone made a mistake. Someone made a big mistake and added a journalist. Nothing against journalists, but you ain't supposed to be on that thing. So they got on there and this happened. I've been, so I can speak to myself or my presence on it. I think my role on it was just speaking for my role. I contributed to it twice. I identified my point of contact, which is my chief of staff. And then later on, I think 3 hours after the White House's official announcements had been made, I congratulated the members of the team. I've been assured by the Pentagon and everyone involved that none of the information that was on there, though not intended to be divulged, obviously that was a mistake. And the White House looking at it at any point threaten the operation of the lives of our servicemen. And in fact, it was a very successful operation, and it's an ongoing operation. But that was the intent behind it. And again, I made it clear that nothing would have endangered lives, and the mission's been very successful.
Was it classified, the information?
Well, the Pentagon says it was not. And not only did they say it was not, they make very clear that it didn't put in danger anyone's life or the mission. There was no intelligence information. And understand, when this story first broke, they were sort of alluding to whether war maps, whether there was no war plans on there. This was a sort of description of what we could inform our counterparts around the world when the time came to do so. Again, look, I think the White House is looking at this entire thing. How did that journalist get on there? Why was this the appropriate? And I think there'll be reforms and changes made, so this was not going to happen again. It can't. But I wanted everybody to understand why this thing was even set up in the first place, and also understand very clearly the mission was successful, and at no point was it endangered. And that's coming from the highest-ranking officials at the agency that was in charge of the actual.
Insurrection Barbie says that the rest of this was just political games by a party who is on life support, and that's it. But I think the bigger issue is they want to get Pete Hegseth off of the cabinet, and they want to restrict or eliminate Signal as a viable tool to use state access it.
Held accountable by the president directly. What happened to withdrawal of Afghanistan?
The progress of the withdrawal across the administration.
Was anyone?
Nobody was fired, right? Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, that's about it, guys. Again, that's not much. Is this worth looking? Oh, this is incredible. This here is incredible. We're going to end on this one because this is actually pretty. This was actually pretty good. Where was it? Did I lose it? Nope. Yeah, this is it. So check this out. So this is this is NPR president, I believe. And so I mean, this is incredible. This is incredible. This is the NPR and the president, I guess, and they're at the Hill. I guess they want more money. I guess they're afraid that Trump is going to defund NPR, which is National Public Radio. It's supposed to be tax money to give to this organization to have non-propagandist type news, but it's everything other than that. So we're going to end here on this clip. It's 3 minutes long. It's absolutely fascinating. I believe this is the president of the NPR, and listen to the answers as she is absolutely grilled in a way you very rarely see, even on Capitol Hill.
Former senior business editor for NPR.
How long do you work at NPR?
I believe he was there just over 25 years.
25 years? Award-winning journalist? Did he win any awards?
Our time did
Peabody Award? That's pretty important, isn't it?
That is, absolutely.
So pretty distinguished journalist, right?
Certainly.
And he wrote a long story about what you do at NPR. Is NPR biased?
Congressman, I have never seen any instance of political bias determining editorial decisions. No.
Well, Mr. Berliner, in his story last year, wrote, in the D.C. area, editorial positions at NPR, he said he found 87 registered Democrats, 0 Republicans. Is that accurate?
We do not track the numbers or the voter registration, but I find that
was an award-winning journalist who worked 25 years at NPR.
Okay, this is not the clip I got. This is not the clip. I gotta find the clip, guys. Let me just bear with this clip. Check it out. If I get this guy, absolutely. This is it. This is it. This is longer than I wanted. It's 5 minutes long. But trust me, it's worth the 5 minutes. Let's go with it.
It's interesting because a lot of your thinking, as expressed by your public statements, is deeply infused with economic and cultural Marxism. Do you believe that America is addicted to white supremacy?
I believe that I tweeted that, and as I've said earlier, I believe much of my thinking has evolved over the last half decade.
It has evolved. Why did you tweet that?
I don't recall the exact context, sir, so I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay. Do you believe that America believes in black plunder and white democracy?
I don't believe that, sir.
You
don't know where that
tweeted
statement
that in
comes from.
reference to a book you were reading at the time, apparently, The Case for Reparations.
I don't think I've ever read that book, sir.
You tweeted about it. You said you took a day off to fully read The Case for Reparations. You put that on Twitter in January of 2020.
I apologize. I don't recall that I did.
Okay.
I no doubt that your tweet there is correct, but I don't recall that.
Okay. Do you believe that white people inherently feel superior to other races?
I do not.
You don't. You tweeted something to that effect. You said, I grew up feeling superior. Ha, how white of me. Why did you tweet that?
I think I was probably reflecting on what.
Never ask questions. Never. When they ask you questions, they already have the answer. So you might as well go ahead and tell the truth.
It was to grow up in an environment where I had lots of advantages.
It sounds like you're saying that white people feel superior.
I don't believe that anybody feels that way, sir. I was just reflecting on my own experiences.
Do you think that white people should pay reparations?
I've never said that, sir.
Yes, you did. You said it in January of 2020. You tweeted, yes, the North. Yes, our original pays in and paid debt. Yes, reparations. Yes, on this day.
I don't believe that was a reference to fiscal reparations.
What kind of reparations was it a reference to?
I think it was just a reference to the idea that we all owe much to the people who came before us.
That's a bizarre way to frame what you tweeted. Okay, how much reparations have you personally paid?
Sir, I don't believe that I've ever paid reparations.
Okay, it's just for everybody else.
I'm not asking anyone
Seems
to pay
to be what you're
reparations, sir.
suggesting. Do you believe that looting is morally wrong?
I believe that looting is illegal, and I refer to it as counterproductive. I think it should be prosecuted.
Do you believe
to the
it's
full extent of the
morally
law.
wrong, though?
Of course.
Of course. Then why did you refer to it as counterproductive? It's a very different way to describe it.
It is both morally wrong and counterproductive, as well as being
You
illegal.
tweeted, it's hard to be mad about protests in reference to the BLM protests, not prioritizing the private property of a system of oppression. You didn't condemn the looting. You said that it was counterproductive. NPR also promoted a book called In Defense of Looting. Do you think that that's use of taxpayer dollar?
I'm familiar with that book, and I don't believe that was a.
You tweeted that you read that book.
I don't believe I did read that book, sir.
Do you think that a few years ago, NPR educated America about, quote, the whole community of genderqueer dinosaur enthusiasts? Do you think that that's an appropriate use of tax dollars?
I was not at NPR at the time, sir.
That's not the question, though. Do you think that that's an appropriate use of our tax dollars?
I think our tax dollars that we use are to be able to provide a wide range of
I'll take that as a yes. You do believe that that's appropriate. Your health advisor at NPR also stated in an interview that, quote, fear of fatness is more harmful than actual fat. Would you like to explain how fear of fatness is more harmful than actual fat? That's an editorial at NPR.
I am not familiar with the editorial, and I don't believe that was during the time here.
It's called Here's How to Think. That's an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars.
I think any reporting on health is an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars, yes.
And you think that editorializing that fat is not unhealthy is appropriate.
I don't know what that article is, sir, and I'm not familiar with it, so I couldn't say.
Fake news. Do you think that basic accommodations like doorways or seat belts represent, quote, latent fat phobia?
I don't have an opinion.
It's also from NPR. Do you think civility is racist?
No, sir.
No. Your outlet ran an article entitled, quote, when civility is used as a cudgel against people of color. That was on All Things Considered. Would you like to explain?
I'm not on the editorial side, sir. I'm not familiar with that story.
You talk about how NPR is news. This is editorialization, and I'll read it. For many people of color in the United States, civility isn't so much social lubricant as it is a vehicle for containing them, preventing social mobility, and preserving the status quo. This is garbage. I'll spend all of my time doing everything I can to ensure you guys never get another dollar of taxpayer funding. This is complete garbage. Thank you, madam.
Absolutely, 100%. And we're done here. I got to run. Something's going on here. One of my roosters is crowing. I figure what's going on there. But yeah, so, I mean, this whole thing is just absolutely nuts. Yeah, maybe do a show on NPR in and of itself, but They have to prop stuff up. And that's the same thing with U.S. aid. What U.S. aid was doing, it was funneling money overseas to countries who had conservative values and tried to undermine their culture and their governments by raising a generation of people on this nonsense to cause division and cause uprisals and all that stuff that's happening here, going back to the 30s and 40s. And again, if you get a chance to check out Reagan, that movie is fantastic. Reagan actually dealt with that with the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood, where he was the president of that, where they were being infiltrated by the commies. And it was a big deal. And it's a big deal now, too. So, that being said, let me do some closing arguments here, some closing statements here. We are on Locals. If you want to check us out on Locals, which is our paywall, you can go to, let me see, I got it right here. You can register at theconservativetech.locals.com/register. There, it's free, and you can literally go there and access our articles that we put out 2 or 3 a week, I guess. And we're going to do another series very soon, which I just am excited to talk about, but not really prepared to actually mention it yet. But it involves essentially history and profiles of famous people. And it's going to be framed in a way that I think you'd be really excited to see. It's all evergreen content, and we're going to do 1 a week. And it's going to be in a way, we'll even probably put it into a published document and maybe even make it available. That will be behind our paywall for sure. And you have to actually be a member or a supporter for that matter. And to be a supporter, what you would do is go to rumble.com, click on join, and from there, click support and follow the menu there. And I think it's $2 minimum a month. Of course, you can do more, but $2 will get you in as a supporter, and you have access to that. Also, you have access to our Biblical Citizenship in Modern America commentary, which is going to be uploaded soon. And when we do it again, we'll be uploading it weekly as well. Extra video of what we cover in that particular series, and also other special live streams and special events as well, giveaways and the like. So with that, guys, thank you so much again for hanging out with us. We will be back tomorrow, Friday, Reaction Friday. We're going to react to a video, movie clip, something tomorrow, and we will talk about that as well tomorrow night, Friday. So with that, guys, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you, The Greater Good, Laura Jenkins, for hanging out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.